Hello and welcome to 2 by 2. This is your host Praveen Gopal Krishnan. I don't have a new episode of 2 by 2 for you this week because I'm taking a break. But what I'm doing is I'm bringing back one of the episodes that we recorded last year. So let me tell you why I'm doing this. Sometime last July, Perplexity, the AI company, it gave a year of Perplexity Pro, its subscription product, free to Airtel's 360 million customers. And just last week, the publication TechCrunch finally had the first set of results on what really happened as a result of that experiment. Now, it's actually quite interesting because some of the numbers that TechCrunch reported on, stuff like Perplexity's active users and how many people after the offer expired ended up becoming paid subscribers, Perplexity's monthly users, all of that is there in the story that I have linked in the show notes right now. But sometime in November, what we did was we did an episode that I titled The Numbers Behind Perplexity and OpenAI's Deal with Airtel and Jio, where what we did was we tried to get together and work out what exactly would happen and what is the math behind all of this. It's one of our most popular episodes because we just got together with a set of numbers and tried to figure out from first principles what's really going on, how much these companies would have paid, what kind of retention they can expect, and what kind of revenue would result once the offer expires. It's actually a fun episode because we were like kind of figuring it out along as we went along. I had two wonderful guests with me. I had Chandrasekhar Vatikuti, who's a former CPO at InMobi, and Prakash Deep Maheshwari, who ran Netflix's growth across India and Southeast Asia. So we did this reverse engineering of what a telco charges for access, how many subscribers would activate, and what the whole thing would cost per head. It's a great episode, and if you haven't listened to it, you should. And that's really what I'm going to do today. And for the rest of this episode, you can go back there and you can relive it. And once you're done, go to the article that I have linked in the show notes, and you can see how much of it we got right based on what assumptions we had. As always, I'll be back again with a brand new 2x2 episode next week.
Today's episode is different. We're going to try a new type of 2x2. It's called reverse engineering the playbook.
Yeah, we have decided not to do opinions today. I mean, we are doing opinions. Usually we get together and we sit.
There's no way we're not doing opinions. We are doing opinions.
Fine, we are doing opinions.
What is the playbook? So firstly, we're calling it reverse engineering the playbook because we're trying to start a new set of episodes where we pick up something which has happened on which there is no clarity and then try to work backwards to try and answer how this thing must have come about. What's that thing that we're doing today, PGK?
Today we are doing this thing about AI companies and telco deals in India. And if you have seen the news, you have seen this. OpenAI is tying up with Phonepe, Perplexity is tying up with Airtel, Gemini is tying up with Jio. So what are these deals
Nobody's
exactly?
tying up with Vodafone.
What are these deals exactly? What's happening inside these deals? Who's gaining? Who's losing? What are the trade-offs?
Let's cut to the chase. Who's spending? Today's episode is where we try and answer, hey, how does this thing happen? How does a Perplexity go to an Airtel and say, bundle us for all of your 391 million subscribers and we'll pay you for it. And then once those people sign up, we'll pay them for it because we're giving away a plan free of cost and we're not charging them for anything. So how do you think Perplexity must have worked out the math for that? And then of course, Google, which did the same with Jio. And then OpenAI, which did a variant of that with Phonepe.
Yeah, and to do this, we are also looking at it from the telco side, which is what's happening inside Airtel. What are the calculations that an Airtel would be making in order to try to figure out how much should we charge these people for all of these subscribers that we have? And here's the thing, Rohin, we're going to try to get a number.
Okay, let's dive in.
Hello, welcome to 2 by 2. My name is Praveen, and today we are going to do something a little different. You've probably seen the headlines over the last few months in India. OpenAI is giving away ChatGPT for free and is even partnering with apps like Phonepe. Google is partnering with Geo and is giving away 18 months of free AI. Airtel is also announcing that 360 million of their customers can get access to Perplexity Pro for completely free for a year. And if you're like those people, you probably thought, oh, cool, free stuff. Maybe you even signed up. I know I did. But here's the thing, nothing is actually free, not when the world's richest tech and AI companies are racing to give away the most premium products to hundreds and millions of Indians. There are calculations, trade offs, and there is a playbook. And today, in this episode, we are going to try to figure out what this playbook looks like. We are going to try to reverse engineer it. We are going to try to figure out what is in it for the telcos, what's in it for the AI companies. And we are all going to do it without using that phrase. Even if 1% of these people upgrade, it will mean this much amount of revenue. We are not going to do that today. That's the only thing that we are not going to do today. And to do that, I have two
Can we say
wonderful
win-win scenario?
we can't say win-win scenario. We are not allowed to say win-win scenario. We are not allowed to say even if 1%. But essentially, what we are trying to do
Can we
is
say
we are
use
trying to
case
do
capital of the world?
maybe another podcast. But we will
All
try to
right.
do two questions, and here are the two questions that we are trying to figure out in this episode. First, what do AI companies actually want from India, and how much are they willing to pay to get it? And two, what do telecom companies want from this partnership, and what are they giving away? To be clear, none of us know what's really going on. We don't have any inside information. We have no sources telling us what's happening, but we're going to try to figure this out together. And hopefully, we'll get a playbook of sorts that gives us some insight on what's going on. And to do this, I have two wonderful guests with me. And the two guests that I have are people from both sides of this equation. My first guest is Prakash Deep Maheshwari, who is the head of product at Grab. Prakash is a strategy, product, and go to market leader with over 15 years in building, launching, and scaling technology businesses across Asia. He drove Netflix's growth and monetization strategy and go to market for revenue growth in, look at the markets, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. Everywhere in the world, Prakash Deep Maheshwari was responsible for Netflix's growth. He also led regional product strategy for India and SEA and member experience and content discovery product strategy for all of these markets. So the reason why I asked Prakash to come on here as a guest is because he joined Netflix as one of the earliest hires in India, and he led strategy for them in that 0 to 1 and in that 1 to 100 phase. And the reason why we think Prakash would be fantastic for this is because the previous era of companies that used telcos to drive a lot of their growth were, of course, OTT companies. Welcome, Prakash. Do I call you Prakash or do I call you PDM?
Anything goes, PGK, whatever works.
Okay. I'm going to call you PDM because it sounds very weird for me to call you Prakash, just like how I imagine it's very weird for others to call me Praveen.
Fine. For the rest of today's episode, I'm going to call you Praveen Gopal Krishnan.
Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, okay, fine. PDM, I just have to ask you, give us a high level sense of what you think of what's going on between these AI companies and telco deals. We'll go into the details, etc. But I think for our listeners, if you had to start and give some very broad starting assumptions in your head on where you're beginning to think about this might be a good time to just tell us broadly what directionally, how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so I think that the way I would frame this from the AI company's perspective, and obviously the what each company may be trying to optimize for may be slightly different, but at a more kind of aggregate level, if I lump them together into this kind of one lot, eventually the game is to monetize in some shape and form. Now, whether it kind of happens through that darn 1% assumption, which we will not talk about, or through ads or through something else, I think no one knows the answer yet. I don't think anyone inside the AI companies themselves knows the answer yet. But I think what they do know is there is value to scale in this kind of business, and India is kind of in some sense the place that gives you scale the fastest and the easiest. And to build that distribution, I guess you want to go at the source where they're trying, like if I were inside a company, I would try to find who can give me scale fast and is desperate enough that they will kind of trade away a large part of their value accretion to me without asking for much in return. And I guess the obvious answer becomes telcos. So I think from an AI company's perspective, it's a way to get distribution and scale fast. Eventually, obviously, distribution is not the end of the game. At the end of the game has to be monetization, but I don't think anyone's kind of thought that far ahead yet. So that's largely kind of where they might be coming from.
Okay. Shots already fired at telcos.
Sorry, yeah, I have a question on that before we get in, Chandra. Like, I mean, why telcos? I understand that telcos have scale, but we're effectively at a duopolistic situation in India between Airtel and Jio, right? Both are profitable, right? Prices are rising. Neither of them, Airtel stock is the best, like, I mean, it's been for a while, etc. So I'm just saying that where is the desperation in Airtel or Jio? I mean, Jio, I can still understand. I mean, there is at some point an IPO coming up, but why be desperate? Why that part?
I think, see, from a telco perspective, ultimately what's happened is over the course of like the last 2 decades, like the telco kind of value chain has essentially become dumb pipes to carry kind of voice and data over time. So the edge to differentiate is something that's kind of gone away. You're right, Rohin, that they are kind of finding ways and means to extract more ARPU from the existing users, but it's still on the
ARPU is
margins. It's still incremental.
average revenue per user. Yeah.
Average revenue per user. It's still on the margins. It's still incremental. It doesn't, in some sense, guarantee retention or future kind of proofness for the business from the telco side. And I guess a little bit of this is honestly prisoner's dilemma. No one really wants to bundle unless they are forced to bundle. It's a little bit, if you go back to like the iPhone carrier bundling kind of history, when iPhones first started bundling, like Apple started first bundling iPhones with carriers, like they went to the Comcast, all of the kind of big players of the world, and basically got like loud out of the room saying like, why would we do this? Then they actually went with T-Mobile. T-Mobile kind of became their first carrier because they were like kind of the number 3, number 4 player in the US at the time. And because T-Mobile did it, that created a differentiation edge that eventually kind of led kind of consumers kind of now starting to peel away from other telcos into choosing T-Mobile. The challenge is when you're a commodity, then anything that gives you even a marginal edge presents anything that gives your competition a bit of a marginal edge presents the risk of kind of consumers going away from you and choosing your competitor because there's a little bit extra that you can get. So I think there's a little bit of bandwagon effect here. If one player does the bundling, the other players have to in some sense follow suit. That's kind of by the way the story that played out with OTTs as well, to kind of PGK's point earlier, that it's not as if everyone wanted to. They were just forced to eventually.
I think the interesting point is that this is just reminding me, there is this movie called Blackberry, which is basically charting the rise and fall of BlackBerry, the movie. If I'm not wrong, it's on Netflix video. So it is, right? Yeah. So in that, if I'm not wrong, it's dramatized and I'm sure slightly fictionalized, but there is a part, if I remember correctly, where the BlackBerry founders go to a telecom, just after Apple launches the iPhone. And the exact thing that you're saying, the before and after of how telecoms have been thinking about bundling is like starkly visible over there, where they're all just sitting and looking and saying, okay, that's it. Is that it? There's nothing else. Why should we do this?
Yeah. And I think it a little bit of like at the end of the day, for any kind of tech company, the holy grail is to kind of become the platform of choice, like where you can kind of aggregate / kind of control the consumer part of the demand side of the equation. Telcos do control the demand part of the equation, but there's pressure as little as they control, except the relationship with the consumer. So I think in some ways, like they're trying to hold on to the last vestiges of kind of what they have by whatever kind of way they can. Like differentiation died in telecom, I guess, a decade ago. So this is their way of importing differentiation by any which kind of way they can.
Yeah, a lot of analysts have also spoken about how telecom differentiation is like very hard. Like most notably Benedict Evans, who talks about telecom and how essentially the dumb pipes thing and infrastructure layer, it's very hard to extract value. So I guess we'll talk about some of those. Now that we are discussing telcos, we have a staunch defender of telcos, and that is my second guest. My second guest is Chandrasekhar Vatikuti, who is the ex-CPO of Inmobi and the SVP of the telco cloud business. This is the second episode that Chandra is on. Chandra was on an earlier episode where we discussed product management. And Chandra, I'm glad to see that you're back here to defend telcos. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about this, because when I reached out to you, you said that about these AI companies and telecom companies. You said, yeah, I kind of have done deals on the telecom side, so I kind of understand a little bit about what they're looking for. So tell us how you're thinking about this at a very high level.
Chandra, but first, PGK introduced you as CPO. Does that mean Chief People Officer?
Oh, I'm sorry.
They have a longer shelf life, I've been told, compared to product guys. So
For sure.
yeah, I mean, I would rather prefer being a people officer than a product officer for them.
I'll just say that there are 3 product people here who are outnumbering a CEO. So this is great.
By the way, Rohin, all chief product officers also by default are people officers.
Oh,
That's true.
Deep.
Yes, CPOs will say that. The question is, will the people in their team say that or not?
Deep.
So thanks for having me, PGK, Ken team, Rohin. So there are largely 2 reasons why telcos do these distribution deals, right? The first one is the money that in many cases drops to the bottom line. May not be true in markets like India. Definitely true in markets like US, where telcos also sell you the handset for most parts, right? Barring the Apple ecosystem. On Android, that's definitely true. Again, there are layers where a Pixel is not as lucrative as a Samsung, is not as lucrative as some other Android OEM handset sale, right? So definitely for the check. The second thing that is true is beyond the check, there is also a constant push to find solutions that just result in more sticky customer base and or new customer acquisition. Again, it's a function of which market you are. Like, for example, in a market like US, there is very less new subscriber addition happening, right? Yes, you do have people moving into the country every now and then, or people switching carriers. But most of that growth is coming in from getting your kids new phones when they are 16 and or immigrants moving into the country, or mostly by subscriber churn, a Verizon taking a T-Mo customer, a T-Mo taking an AT&T customer, and so on and so forth. So we've seen those 2 reasons why telcos do these deals. And it could be a 50-50 split, or in most cases, it's like a 75-25 motivation. Money being the primary, second being something that helps result in a lesser churn, for the lack of a better word.
I'm also going to throw it to Rohin. How are you thinking about this, Rohin?
You asked earlier what's driving it. I mean, I feel it's money. Prakash said that there's desperation involved. I agree that there's desperation, but at the end of the day, it just looks like Chandra also made that point, that typically such deals go straight to the bottom line, right? Because in some senses, you're renting out your customer base. And in return, whoever wants access to that customer base gives you money. So it's easy money. The trade-off is that there is obviously the fact that you're giving up something that you could have built and captured more value of, but it's a battle between short-term game versus strategic. So the question would essentially be then, what could a telco or what could a Phonepe do on the AI side, and do they really want to do that? Do they really want to invest and build and nurture that? I suspect nobody really knows. And everybody's probably thinking, look, all of this is going to burn down with all the data centers in the next 18 months. So might as well ride it and make the money while we can, right? So I think it's a very fairly prudent strategy. Make money while it's, hey, all these trillions that these guys are raising, give them. So actually the analogy is, remember when during the boom years of the VC, we were all ordering stuff at discounts from all over the place, and like, God bless VCs. This is that, but at a planetary scale, where the Airtels and Geos of the world are saying, God bless sovereign funds and Saudi Arabia, and they're essentially taking off the money from the OpenAIs and Perplexities of the world. It's just operating at a different scale.
Yeah, it's a variant of like in a gold rush. And they used to say in a gold rush, sell shovels. In this one, it is in a gold rush, sell subscribers. So then you'll get that. I'll start by basically telling all of our listeners that the four of us haven't like gotten together and done some math and figured things out. We're going to be doing this more or less live, which means that during this podcast, there may be times where I will just stop, or one of us may stop and just do a lookup on Google on, well, how many subscribers do they have? How many users do they have? So we may be doing stuff like that. So I just want everyone to know that. And Prakash said right in the beginning that not all these deals are the same. And he's right. And I'll explain. First, we have to distinguish between the three AI companies. There's OpenAI, there's Gemini, and there's Perplexity. And all three of them have done something somewhat similar, but also different. I'll start with Perplexity because they're the ones I think who announced it first. So Perplexity teamed up with Airtel. Airtel has, by my estimate, 360 million subscribers. And what they did was they said, if you're a subscriber of Airtel, you will get access to Perplexity Pro for a year for free. Now, the sticker price for Perplexity Pro is around 17,000 rupees. So you could get that and you could install it and you can use Perplexity Pro, which presumably gives access to, better search and better higher end models, etc. So that's one. Second is Gemini and Google. So what Google has done is, actually I'm saying Gemini, but technically speaking it's Google, because Google has partnered with Geo and it's offering 18 months of free Gemini Pro, but also it's adding a few other things to it. Now, I'll just say what that is. It's offering Google's AI Pro plan with the latest version of Google Gemini to Geo unlimited 5G plan users at no extra cost for 18 months. Offer will begin rolling out to users between 18 to 25 years of age and will soon extend to include every eligible Geo user nationwide. So it's kind of like a phased rollout. In fact, today, they announced that they have upgraded it, not just the Gemini 2.5, but Gemini 3, which just released like in the last couple of days. And of course, along with that, they have also added things like expanded access to Notebook LM, which is, of course, as listeners know, Rohin's favorite AI product for study and research. It includes 2 TB of cloud storage for Google Photos, Gmail, Drive, and backing up. Oh, okay. And yeah. So all of this together comes to around 35,000 rupees. That's like the sticker price. So that's the second thing. The third is, of course, OpenAI. Now, OpenAI is the most interesting because OpenAI started off by saying, in fact, there were reports like around 6 months back that OpenAI was in talks with Reliance Jio. And there were some people saying, they're going to actually do a distribution partnership. Makes a lot of sense. Didn't really go anywhere. And in fact, what they did was they launched ChatGPT Go, which is a lower tier subscription. To the best of my knowledge, it's only in India and it is a much lower price point. And second, what they've done is they have gone and tied up with Phonepe, which of course, as we know, is not a telco, but on the application side. In fact, we discussed this in yesterday's episode of Zero Shot, the Ken's AI podcast, where Rohin and I host along with my colleague Brady. Please listen to that, where we talk about that a bit. So there, it's almost like a quasi-advertising deal where people can click on it and, go to ChatGPT and you can create like, so it's not really an app download kind of.
Sorry, but why do you assume that the other two are not advertising deals, like the Airtel Perplexity deal, and ultimately isn't like there is no deep integration in any of this. It is really, if you are a subscriber of Airtel, you get Perplexity Pro free. Here's how you sign up. If you are a subscriber of Geo, you get Gemini and other Google AI tools Pro for free. Sign up. There is no deep integration. I think with Phonepe also, it's really that. I mean, and it goes back to that point about all these entities, telcos, Phonepe, etc., with large user bases are just saying we've got the hundreds of millions of user bases and you can access them, pay us some money, and we let you go through the gate. That's really it. I think you got to disregard what these companies are calling it, because they are calling it collaboration and partnership and all of that, but it's just pay us money and we let you through this door.
Fair enough. I think I'll start by basically asking maybe, PDM, like hypothetically speaking, if assuming you were sitting in the shoes of these AI companies and you were writing this playbook, I imagine the first sentence on that would be, what do we get out of this? Like, what is the quote unquote success metric over here?
Sorry, PGK, before we jump in there, this is going to be very odd because now I'm going to say PGK and PDM. So
Sure.
I'm going to solve that by calling Praveen Gopal Krishnan and then PDM. So then there is,
Sure.
so listeners, I'm doing this for the benefit of listeners. All right, Praveen Gopal Krishnan, I'm just going to try and clarify. Before we get to the returns part of this equation, right? Because what we are trying to do on this podcast is try and figure out how does the math work. So can we try and guesstimate the cost side of the equation for the tech companies? Help us understand, PDM, how would an OpenAI and a Perplexity and a Google do the math? I'm assuming as a layperson that there are two maths involved here. One is what are you paying these partners in return for that access? And second, what is the cost that you will be incurring on free users in return for, because unlike other internet products, we know that AI products actually come with, in fact, even many paid AI products operate at a loss because it actually costs more to run AI queries, etc. Right? So when you give away a product free of cost, there's actually a double whammy, right? Because you are incurring a loss as consumers use your product even more. So there are two sides of that, right? You're first paying out money to telcos or Phonepe and losing money there, and then you're losing money on the people who sign up. So how do we estimate that cost side first before we go to the return side?
I just want to say there is a third bucket. The third bucket is admittedly really small, but the third bucket is opportunity cost, which is some of these people who are getting it would have been people who would have otherwise paid for it anyway. Admittedly, that's probably a really small chunk, but it is what it is. So those are broadly the three buckets as I see it.
Yeah. So I think, the way I would I think the three buckets make sense. So there's an acquisition cost, Rohin, to your point. That's essentially what is the rent the AI companies are paying telcos to kind of get access to their kind of consumer bases. The way I would characterize the usage, the inference cost, so to say, essentially is the cost of retention. That's essentially your way to build stickiness.
Right.
With
It's
the
a
users.
subsidy. It's a user subsidy.
It's a
or
user
something
subsidy
like
essentially
that,
to build
right?
retention. And then obviously opportunity cost, PGK, to your point on are you cannibalizing some real revenue that you potentially would have made? I think the third one is probably the easiest one to kind of, I would say, it's a rounding error in the scheme of things for India.
In the context of India.
In the context of India, at some point, yes, I guess when subscription takes off in a big way and kind of AI takes off in a big way, I think it's going to be material, but not yet.
2047.
Fine, we can throw out the third
So
one.
let's park that for now. If I look at the retention cost, which is kind of the subsidy part of it, I think that is something which the AI companies, and it's true across the three of them, it's a bet that they have collectively made, and that's not an India specific bet. In a way, Rohin, to your point, the amount of I buy a ChatGPT, I have a ChatGPT Plus subscriber which costs $20 here. I don't unfortunately have Go in Singapore. I'm pretty sure with the volume of usage I have of ChatGPT, the inference for them is costing definitely more than $20. So even though I am on the Plus subscription, they're likely losing money from me as an incremental user. There's obviously the $200 kind of pro subscription as well. Pretty sure that you have power users there who potentially they may be losing money on. So I think the retention side of it is a explicit bet that they've made on we want to kind of build habits and build stickiness and build defaults. And this is the cost of doing this. In India, arguably, I would say that cost is also lower because the majority of the base that telcos give them access to are not necessarily heavy kind of AI users yet. So in some ways, the sticker price obviously is one thing. Like PGK, the numbers you threw on $70,000 or $35,000. Those are obviously that's kind of the marketing speak on what it kind of costs. The real cost obviously is how much it costs from an inference perspective, and that honestly, for an average Indian kind of telco bundle user, it's not much. So I think whatever they are giving away as inference cost is still very, very marginal in comparison to what they may be losing
Would
on
you
like
have
subscribers
even
elsewhere.
a ballpark range of what that might be on a monthly basis?
So if
We are-
I think on a sorry, PJK.
No, I was just saying that we are anyway guesstimating. So that's
Yeah,
that's
I
really
think
what
my kind of rough sense on that is an average kind of query, let's say like whatever, 100 token query, for example, typically ends up costing about kind of half, anywhere between like 8 to 12 cents, depending on kind of where servers or data centers are. So that's like, what, 6 rupees, 7 rupees. So if you're looking at a user that does, I don't know, 100 queries in a month, which I guess is still on the higher side, you're potentially looking at a cost of like 500, 600 bucks that you're doing. So essentially kind of subsidizing, which is not much. Like it's in like at a kind of dollar kind of value, it's like $700. It's not really that much from a subsidy perspective. I guess the bigger component, which is the acquisition side of it, is what they're giving telcos, because that's kind of where it doesn't necessarily translate to, like, the challenge with India is acquisition. So distribution is not the same thing as acquisition, and acquisition is not the same thing as monetization. So what I mean by that is, yes, you're paying these telcos a certain amount of money to get access, but how much of that access will translate in a guaranteed way to usage and then eventually monetization is very, very circumspect. So to me, I think the biggest open bet or the riskiest bet is on kind of that acquisition piece. I think, and this is where I don't have a good sense of
Sorry,
what the
Prakash, can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Since you've kind of operated in this space in a different context at Netflix, etc., through these telco, when such partnerships are signed, what are the contours of such partnerships? Is it on a per user based fee? Is it, oh, you're Airtel, you have so many subscribers, and it's a lump sum that in return for bundling me and offering it to all your subscribers, I'm going to pay you X. I don't care if 300 million sign up. I don't care if 30 sign up. Airtel will say, I'll still charge you same. Or is it like a per
Minimum
acquisition based,
Yeah,
right?
so-
or
Like
there
where
is a
you
minimum
say,
guarantee.
what is
There's
it?
an MG
There's
at
a minimum
play.
guy, yeah. So I think the way it typically works is there's three components of it, Rohin. In most deals, and different deals can have some of these or not, or all of these, but there is a kind of success linked component, which is like, hey, I get one acquisition and I pay you X dollars in lieu of that. So that's kind of the most kind of plain vanilla construct that typically gets attached to a minimum guarantee. To BGK's point, that you want to kind of make sure that, let's say the deal is structured as Airtel gives me 1 million subscribers for which I will pay X. If you don't hit the million number, you still pay me whatever would have been due for the million subscribers. So that's kind of the main, I would say, the bulwark of these deals. There's a marketing component of it, because when you are using as an OTT or as an AI company, when you are using the telcos surface areas to reach consumers, they're actually giving you a bunch of real estate in terms of like placement on their app, in terms of kind of being able to like when they send out their marketing comms, a bunch of those things. So that there's a marketing component of it. Now, different companies kind of look to think of it differently, but essentially you are
Interesting. So that's a separate, in a sense, line item of sorts.
essentially a line item. You're essentially there's a sales side of it and there's a marketing side of it. So you are essentially using the telco as a marketing channel because they have reach, they have kind of the ability to kind of reach kind of these players. A third piece, which doesn't always kind of come into the picture, but sometimes happens, is where you would have a way of you typically would have a payment integration of sorts, where the challenge is subscription businesses, and you guys operate in the space, so you know this very well. Obviously, with the UPI autopay, things have gotten better, but the payment side of the equation of subscription has always been pretty painful for us business in India. Now, telcos, obviously, because they've been doing it for years together, they have the ability to, in some sense, I guess they have more people are money to throw at the problem. So sometimes when you have payment integration, typically the telco also becomes the channel through which a consumer ends up paying for Netflix if it's not a free bundle, if it's an add-on. So that's an add-on construct that typically happens. But for the AI deals that we're talking about, the third one is probably not relevant because it's essentially free deals. There's no
Yeah.
kind of per use,
There's
like
no
users not
payment.
paying anything essentially for it.
Yeah. Perhaps it may kick in at time of upgrade or renewal or something in a year or 18 months. Maybe.
Which is,
I'm
by
not
the way,
sure.
another motivation for the AI companies to go the telco route or the Phonepe route for that matter, because I think last I checked, ChatGPT, before they launched the Go tier, or maybe it's true even today, they were trying to run their payment gateway in India through Stripe. Which kind of has, I think most of
Didn't
us
work out too well. Underestimated.
yeah,
They try.
for obvious reasons.
You know, they can solve AGI, but they can't solve UPI.
That's it.
And thank you, RBI.
Yeah, exactly. So, very acronyms there. But I think in some ways, I think the ability to latch on to someone who already has a payment relationship with a consumer on a recurring basis does give you that optionality in the future of you may never convert enough kind of paying users, but for whatever ones you do, you essentially at least build a seamless and easy to kind of pass through experience on the payment rails. So that's kind of maybe the other angle there.
So I'm just trying to summarize what I've gotten so far, right? Number one, we basically said that there are three costs involved. One is, of course, the money that you pay telecoms. Second is there's the inference cost, and third is whatever opportunity cost. We threw out the third. So let's look at the first two. So in the first two, we looked at the second bucket, and we said the second bucket, broadly our estimation, or at least PDM's estimation, is that
$500 per user.
$500
Per
per
month.
user per month,
Yeah,
and
which is, by
that
the
is
way,
the user.
100 queries is a lot. So I'm guessing
100
the
queries
median
is
is
a
probably
lot.
definitely lower.
So 600 to 700 we reduced to 500. So which
But
annually
he's saying
is
it's probably lesser than
6,000.
that.
Let's reduce it to 5,000. Let's reduce
Yeah,
it to
maybe
4,000
5,000 a year.
annually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4,000
4,000
annually?
to 5,000 a year. Yeah. Let's
Fine.
keep it conservative. 4,000
Fine.
per user per year.
So it's 4,000 rupees per user per year that they are getting. That's the thing that
No,
on the
that they're
inference
spending.
side. Sorry,
Yeah,
that they're
that they're
spending.
spending.
That they're spending, not
essentially.
getting, that they're spending. And that is again on the inference side. We haven't gone into the telecom side, right? So, but
Yeah.
now without getting into the numbers on the telecom side, because that is where we'll ask Chandra to come in, I think what we are really saying is that from the perspective of AI companies, there are fundamentally 3 or 4 line items that get involved over here. First is there is some money that you would pay in order to just acquire a user. So either that is paid for regardless of people sign up or they just see it. That's one.
Can we estimate that? What that might be? Even ballparks for that?
I think
Like
I
how much they
How,
pay.
how do we?
They like how much an AI
what's
company might be.
Let's assume the most, because you said the most common model, and that bears true, right? Because even in media, etc., the minimum guarantee where you say that, look, I'll pay you X, but you have to guarantee me so much, or else there'll be some clauses, right? I mean, that's generally the most common method. So in such a method, in order to get access to, let's say, user bases at the range of 300 million, etc., and all that, what might be ballparks that we're looking at?
Yeah, I don't know if Chandra has a point of view on this, but the way I see it is because the typical way you would structure this is a certain percentage of your sticker price is what you end up paying to the telco. I think what that percentage number is would end up being drastic. My guess is it is drastically different for an AI subscription versus it is for a somewhat lower value subscription like, I don't know, like YouTube Premium or an Amazon Prime or Hotstar for that matter.
But
Because-
Prakash,
Yeah.
here that's also inverted. That's on the negative side, right?
It is a cost.
Normally, when a YouTube Premium hypothetically says 500 rupees, so a telco can say, fine, you're hoping to sell a 500 rupees subscription, I'll charge you 10% of it, $50, right? Just to kind of.
Yes.
Here, you're like, fine, you're hoping to subsidize 4,000 rupees. You're like, how do I take, like, I'm gonna. I'm assuming that a telco is not going to say, I'm going to pay you 400 rupees because minus is 10% of minus 4,000 is minus 400.
No, and in this case, the sticker price is actually a deterrent.
Exactly.
Because
So
if
that's my point. So I think if I were a telco, I would very happily go and say, hey, by the way, I bundle all these OTTs
Exactly.
at 20%. Why don't I bundle you at
Correct.
20% as
Yeah.
well? And as a telco, that would be my kind of in the negotiation, my starting point. But from an AI company
Correct.
perspective, I guess the starting price itself is so high. And they're already, to your point, Rohin, they're already spending so much on inference, which is a cost that is not going away. It only goes up as kind of your engagement and usage goes up. I think there is definitely a harder push on what that percentage is, and it likely is much lower than the 10% that I guess we're
All
speaking
right.
about.
Like so let's hold that, like, Chandra, sorry, we'll just bring you in here, but I just want to complete this thought. Let's, since AI companies bundling their products is a different ball game because they are subsidizing the cost itself, so you don't have any potential revenue. Let's put that aside for a minute and let's imagine a different product. Let's imagine it's the Ken, right? An annual subscription to the Ken costs 3,245 rupees, the basic one, right? Let's keep it. Actually, let's take the premium one because it costs about
it's a
5,000
round
rupees.
number, it's 5,000 rupees. Yeah.
Right, 5,000 rupees.
5,000, yep.
I go to Airtel and say, I want to bundle the Ken and offer it to all your subscribers. Now, what might Airtel charge me?
I would say that Airtel, like the starting point would be kind of in the 20% ballpark. That's usually
Wow.
kind of for the most part distribution through a telco, or I guess
And this
not
is
just telco.
20% of people who sign up.
Yes,
right?
with a minimum
like,
guarantee.
not the absolutely.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
assuming that you're 300 million. I assume that maybe 2 million out of them are actually business news consumers, even though you're sending out to 300 million. So on those 200 million, 2 million, Airtel will say, whoever signs up, I'll take 20% of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if that
Essentially, it's
doesn't
like,
happen,
the way
then
you see
we'll
it is
okay.
it's kind of linked to
Interesting.
activations, not
Got it.
necessarily
exactly.
kind of
Also, the
reach.
event is activation.
Activation is
Okay,
the event
fair.
through which triggers it.
Again, let's be
Thanks.
conservative here. Let's assume that the AI companies are great negotiators. So let's say that even you take Perplexity as an example. Perplexity is say 17,000. We're not doing 20%. We're not even doing 10%. Let's go below that. And let's say 1,000 rupees. Right? Which is around 6%, give or take,
Yep.
to the sticker price. We agree the sticker price is whatever, but let's say it's 6%. So that's around 1,000 rupees per activation, right? That's the second line item. Sorry, that's the first line item. The second line item is there is a marketing thing, which I'm assuming is like a lump sum. I know we can break that down to number
Yeah,
of
but
impressions.
let's
et cetera,
assume
et cetera.
the 5,000 or 6,000 kind of lumps that cost as well.
Fair. Which 5,000, 6,000? An additional 5,000,
No, the
6,000?
6% you said, the 6% essentially.
Oh, it includes that, is it? Okay,
Yeah.
fine. All right, let's assume it is. So that means that right now, here is the math. The math right now is if you're taking something like, say, a Perplexity or let's take Perplexity as an example. You spend close to 4,000 rupees for an average user over a year, just in terms of inference. And second cost item is you're paying roughly 1,000 rupees to the telco for every activation.
Yep.
This is where we are, and this is fairly conservative, and this is where we have reached. So it's 5,000 users per activation.
5,000
All right, Chandra.
rupees
5,000
per
rupees
user.
per activation.
Sorry, 5,000 rupees per user for activation. Chandra, I would like to bring you in here. Does this make sense? Does this sound right from the telco side, or do you think there are other things and other considerations?
The only thing that I'm unable to kind of get past is that if you were to treat this activation channel as a competition to any other activation channel, right? Say, if Perplexity had the resources and like manpower to go use Google, Meta, Amazon, whatever the acquisition channels are, right? And say, I will try and drive 20, 30 million subs, and I might end up reaching the same reach that Airtel has, right? Like say 360 million. I would argue that this channel is not going to be essentially costlier than, say, advertising, right? At some point, I'm sure some growth marketer or the gentleman, Dimitri, who's the Perplexity CBO, will say, am I better off trying to strike something with Airtel, or should I go spend that money on the Googles and the Metas and just a plug to my previous employer, the InMobis of the world, right? And go acquire those users. So that'd be the first test or first throughput. Now, you could argue that I would assume that 20% of a sticker price as a marginal cost also seems on the higher side. Like paying $10 for a user in India, unless you are in the real money gaming or unless you are in things where your traditional channels don't work, there is not that much, I would say, as it is, there is no money to be made today for any of these AI applications, right? They're yet to kick in a non-subscription based monetization. And subscription based monetization is a long haul game in India. I would argue that it seems on the higher side. Even 1,000 rupees as an expense or a user acquisition cost for an activated user seems on the higher side.
What about
Though I don't.
What's realistic,
Yeah.
Chandra? 500?
I would say if you equate it to the opportunity cost for a telco, right? What other thing could they use that real estate for? Could they use it for their own services? Let's take Google as an example, right? Geo is actually bundling in a 2 terabyte Google Drive storage, right? While having its own Geo Cloud service. Now, you would argue that somewhere giving up the optionality of pushing their service is worth something to them, right? Because they don't get anything material unless they have struck a very sweet deal with Google where every renewal results in still some lingering, almost like money that keeps coming in year after year. I would argue that the cost for a telco, the bookends of what they are willing to ask for and what they are willing to kind of walk away from the deal would be somewhere between opportunity cost to a number. That number, I'm assuming, is not as high as 1,000, but is not going to be lower than a $2 to $3 at the least, right? At the least. So you're talking about somewhere between that 200 to 1,000 being where it doesn't become worth the politics, it doesn't become worth the opportunity cost. And the halo of marketing is potentially going to be short-lived, right? Like yes, today Geo has a tweet handle retweeting the Google Gemini launch. I'm sure that results in some halo saying that Reliance is where you can get Gemini models and you may not get it with someone else. I'm sure that pull or consumer association is worth something in marketing terms. But I'm assuming that price would be somewhere in that $3 to potentially $15 ballpark.
And just to remind everyone that Google is an investor in Geo as well. So there is a strategic relationship as well.
Yeah. I want to make two quick points on this. So I think what Chandra said kind of initially around the fact that sitting inside an AI company, the way any strategy or business person would be looking at it is, if my goal is to go and acquire these X million users, should I take the path of not building distribution or trying to acquire these myself and go the telco route, which is kind of option one. And option two is essentially, should I go and actually now plaster Bangalore's billboards and with kind of OpenAI and ChatGPT and like try and find a way to organically acquire consumers?
Correct.
I think the way the math is stacking up in their head is arguably the second path is much harder. And the first is probably more expensive, but easier. By the way, that also follows. If
sorry,
you look at,
sorry to interrupt you. When you say easier or harder, I'm assuming what you're talking about is through the dimension of time.
yes,
because that's what you also said,
time,
right?
Yes. Time, kind of resource distraction. You have to you have to know that all three of these are companies where decision making is still centralized in the US. They do have India presence, but there's no business kind of leadership decisioning happening here. So for them, essentially, if they can abstract away the problem to a local partner to begin with, that's an okay kind of place to start from. So that's one. By the way, that also reflects in the sequence in which some of these deals are played out, PGK. So you mentioned Perplexity was the first one to go. They possibly are the least established of the three. So in some sense,
Yeah, that's being very charitable, but go for it. Huh?
yeah. So like I heard this joke from somebody that Perplexity should probably rename themselves to Audacity, given how audacious their goals are. But from their perspective, given their starting point was what it is, for
It
them
sort
it
of
was
makes
like,
sense, na? Sorry, just to kind of before we move on from this, it's like this. There are these animals that kind of make themselves really big and like put out these fancy colors and all that kind of stuff because like that's the only way that they can survive, right? So in some senses, again, Perplexity is a very large and well-funded company, but in the ecosystem in which they operate,
they
the
are
apex
they are small
predators are
potatoes.
way bigger than themselves, right? So it sort of makes sense that of course they would puff themselves. They would be the first ones
Yeah.
to essentially puff their chest up and display threatening colors and
Yeah.
like all of
and,
those
and
things,
say
right?
things
So
like
yeah,
we want
sorry.
to acquire Chrome. Yeah, exactly. I
Absolutely,
know.
it
I know
makes
what you mean.
sense.
Yeah. Sorry, please continue. Peter.
And yeah, to that point, like OpenAI was the last to the game because if you look at the company's DNA to the extent kind of it's kind of known, if you listen to what Sam Altman publicly at least says, they kind of their ambition is to kind of be kind of quote unquote kind of the third platform in the internet epochs. Like you had Windows as the first one, Android/iOS the second one. They kind of want to make ChatGPT or like any of their other, I would say, kind of products as the platform. So in some sense, they are probably they went into this kicking and screaming is kind of how I like to believe. Seeing Gemini and Perplexity doing it, they would want to own the consumer relationship as as direct as they can in an ideal world. But because they either saw that they couldn't or just that they were too late to the game and like Gemini had stolen a march on them, they had to in some ways. So that's one point. The second point I wanted to make was kind of the point on economics, and Chandra said the what is it that you're paying the telco for? There is an acquisition side of it, which is essentially getting people to the front door. The reality, and you guys operate in the business, so you know this, like subscription businesses are made or broken on retention and stickiness. So yes, you obviously need to get a bunch of people through the door. And today, yes, the retention is essentially kind of not accreting any money to you because anything multiplied by any number of like tenure is basically zero LTV. But in a future state, if they do start monetizing in some shape and form, the fact that if they have consumers who are sticky and retentive, that will kind of set them up. And this is something I learned that kind of I can speak from my Netflix experience that in the OTT business, a telco bundle consumer is always a better retaining consumer than a non-telco bundle consumer because
Really?
habits are because essentially, so imagine it from a user perspective. If I have signed up for Netflix directly through my credit card or through in most cases UPI autopay, every
Correct.
month I get a notification saying, hey, by the way, tomorrow you're going to get charged this amount of money from kind of your UPI. A bunch that is a moment of truth for a lot of people to go into their UPI app and now think, okay, did I watch enough Netflix last month? Like maybe I should cancel. Maybe I'm paying this money unnecessarily. Versus when you are bundled through a telco, that moment of truth never arrives. You're essentially, because you're not paying something out of pocket directly. Even if it's a payment integration, it's a lot more seamless. You're not facing that moment of truth on a recurring basis every month. So a telco bundle consumer gives you, obviously, on a per month basis, they make you less, but they just end up staying for longer, and end up sticking around more. So I guess that retention angle is also something that I think they're budgeting in the economics.
Sorry, this is very interesting. Okay, I want to understand this. So, what is the retention path from an OTT perspective if you're via a telco? What is that? What does that look like? Like once a year when I have to like, how does it work?
So it's different for postpaid versus prepaid. Prepaid obviously operates
Sure.
very similarly to, or actually operates much worse, where as your pack expires, there's quite a high likelihood that kind of the user also ends up churning. For postpaid, because the churn is so low for the postpaid plan itself, you essentially end up riding on the coattails of that underlying plan's churn. So if the underlying plan's churn is low, your effective bundle churn also ends up being low. It's definitely higher than the underlying plan, but it is lower than what an organic kind of consumer's churns looks like.
This is very interesting. Okay, got it. Very cool. Awesome. So I'll just come back to Chandra because Chandra is like I get the arguments. The arguments are on speed. There is this very persuasive argument on retention, which I understand. I think Chandra's argument is it's probably, if from his perspective, it's probably not $1,000 because it's excessive. I think he said it's probably closer to like what, $5 to $7. So what? That's a 600 rupees, give or take. It's probably more. I don't know, but let's say it's
Let's
600,
say
700
500.
rupees.
500 for
rupees.
simplicity's
Fine.
sake, because
Let's
which
say it's
aligns very well with our monthly estimates, with our very scientific estimates for how much they're losing per month, which is also 500, is also 500. I'm just amazed, like, with this
okay.
level of accuracy.
Fine. Chandra, anything else you want to add from the telecom side?
Uh, not beyond what we've discussed, right? So there is obviously direct money. There is the halo from marketing that you can exploit, and maybe even preferential access, right? I don't know if, say, Reliance and Google have done something where you get the first taste of the latest and greatest models for Geo subscribers, and maybe the regular population in a market like India gets it a few months later, right? I don't know if that's going to kick in at some point in time, but you could create enough, I would say, reinforcement loops, both for Google and for Reliance, when you're driving a very material part of their distribution, right? That those could be other non-monetary benefits that telcos typically tend to. For example, obviously the power structure is different, but Perplexity has done co-branded Perplexity app for some carriers, right? Perplexity has been fairly big in trying to use telco as a distribution channel. They have worked with SoftBank in
Yes.
Japan. They worked with Deutsche in Europe. So it is something that they've gone over and above their core app, along with sweeteners, maybe better models and whatnot. So it's the hard cash that the AI firms are willing to give. It's a marketing halo, and you could argue that it could be preferential limits and or first dibs at certain models as and when they launch them. So there could be other benefits beyond the absolute cash component.
Got it. Follow-up question for you, Chandra. From the telco side, I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you to guess
Yeah.
what would be, assuming there is a minimum guarantee that is signed, what would be the minimum guarantee? How many activated users can a telco, how many would they agree for?
Purely because everything's a funnel. I
Yeah.
don't think I'm sure these deals are as complicated as they get, right? I'm sure there is a step function saying you get me 10 million activations, this is what accrues to you. You get me 30 million, this is what accrues to you. And then some outlandish number, right? Almost to create incentives on both sides. So an AI firm in this case would want to say, get me 50 million subs. I'm willing to give you as much as $10 or $20, right? Some artificial number, purely to align the incentives to say you will do what is in your capability to go drive that user, right? And hopefully if that user is of the same quality, then I can go anywhere from 10 million in worst case to potentially 100 million subs, right? Again, it's a function of risk appetite. I'm speculating here, but I'm assuming Perplexity's acquisition model may not match what Google's acquisition model could be, right? For Gemini, Google might have been more aggressive in terms of number of subscribers that Reliance can drive for them. So it will boil down to what is your stop loss, what is your appetite for risk, and modeling that into the deal terms so that you are aligning the incentives if you are really risk seeking, right? On the AI firm side. To say, go drive 50 million subscribers, don't worry about it. Every 10 million subscribers above a certain tier, I'm willing to kind of sweeten the deal disproportionately for you.
PDM makes sense?
No, I kind of broadly agree with what Chandra said. I think from an AI, I think the two sides, the two parties kind of involved in this, they are optimizing for different things, which is why kind of the deal kind of works out in some ways. Like as a telco, I am looking to accrue whatever I can to my bottom line, like grow
Correct.
ARPU essentially. Anything that allows me to kind of grow ARPU without investing in infrastructure, tower cost, all of that, essentially is a straight flow through bottom line. So I think the incentive there is very clear. The AI companies at this stage, because whether you kind of call it a gold rush, whether it's kind of irrational exuberance, whatever kind of way you want to frame it, they are not looking at the economics yet. So in some sense, it's a bet on can we kind of get to scale distribution default habit building for millions, maybe tens of millions of users before anyone else can. The thing also that's kind of, I would say, somewhat different from the OTT world, which I'm a little more familiar with, is there is a certain degree of affinity that you have because the underlying product you're consuming on an OTT is still the content. So if you want to watch the World Cup match, it doesn't matter whether you kind of have a Netflix bundle, like a telco bundles Netflix or not. You will find a way to get to Hotstar because they carry they carry the content you want to watch. The same applies for other kinds of content as well. With AI kind of models, eventually it may differentiate more and more. But today, you could, in a blind test, like I don't know how many consumers can really tell one from the other. So you are essentially like, yes, you're putting like obviously the label of like, yeah, all of these kind of different models, all of the different, I would say, upgrades that you're doing on it. But at the end of the day, it is an answer engine that you're kind of building, which is difficult for users to kind of choose one versus the other. So in a world where you could be commoditized, or you don't have as much edge on competitive differentiation, scale kind of becomes kind of a moat that you want to build as fast as possible. So that's why I think like how aggressive OTTs were bundling versus how aggressive AI companies are bundling, how much they're willing to spend on doing it, I guess also is an order of magnitude different because of that.
Uh, I would maybe agree and disagree a bit to what PDM is saying. I think for some languages in India, right, just in the India context, for some languages in India, I think most models seem to have enough data with them, right? Maybe Hindi plus 4 other languages. But if you really want data at scale, I'm sure synthetic data can get you reasonably far, right, with model accuracy and so on and so forth. But there are always going to be nuances in India where maybe code mixing, as they call it, where you're speaking half the sentence in, say, Telugu and half of it in English. Now, you're not going to get too many sources of training data that have it available, right? And even if you want to kind of now, assuming there's a gold rush, you want to get there before everyone else, there's a disproportionate value to that. And the fact that Indians also tend to be extremely aggressive with their app usage, right? Like they're at the forefront of most classes of mobile app consumption, be it OTT, be it content, be it speaking apps and whatnot, be it games. And I mean, invariably, we are in the top 5 countries in the world, right? No matter which app it is. So I would say the training cost and benefits to the AI firm are also disproportionate. Now, is there a way to model that? Maybe, I'm sure they have some intrinsic model saying that this is what data is worth to us, right? I would give them that much credit that, yes, it is a gold rush, but they do have a sense that this is what synthetic data is versus actual consumer data is versus this is what we pay firms like Mercor or whatever, right? So I'm sure some of that is also a line item in this cost estimation, saying this much we can underwrite purely by the strategic access to data from Indian consumers for languages where there may not be any training data at all. Right?
Now you switched over to the benefit side. We were discussing the cost side. So now you're saying that this is the value of the data and training that users are providing to us free of cost. But anyway, before we get to that, I just have one question, right? Till now, we've been discussing largely from a telco point of view. I want to ask both of you this question of the value of a telco user versus a non-telco user. Prakash, you briefly hinted at it. Now, Phonepe has over 600 million registered users. Airtel has less than 400 million, about 391 million, right? If you are going to tie up with either Phonepe or Airtel, and of course, let's first rule out that those top line numbers make no sense, because whatever your product is, you're probably not getting, like, even the most impressive product like ChatGPT, etc. Like you said, like, maybe they're hoping for a couple of tens of millions of users or something like that. But
No, but
that
I wanted
said,
to ask them to estimate the activation, but we'll come to that. Go for it.
yeah,
Finish up.
that's a separate. My point is, Phonepe has 1.5x, more than 1.5x the number of registered users on Phonepe, but Airtel's are paying subscribers, but still 391 million was a 600 million, right? who would you go for, and how do you cost access to those, and how would you treat those subscribers if you were an AI company, if you were Perplexity, if you were Google, if you were OpenAI, and you're actually hoping to kind of get users? Who do you go for first, and why, and whose subscribers would you value more?
I'll let them jump in, but before that, I will say that the question itself needs to be framed differently because, in a sense, the PhonePe users are not subscribers of PhonePe; they're just users
Yes.
of PhonePe.
Yes.
So
That's why
there is no
I said it's 600 million registered users of PhonePe versus 391 million subscribers of Airtel. But those are the only headline numbers that top level comparison for both of them, right? I'm sure there will be some. I'll try and look up what's the equivalent number, monthly transacting users or something like that for PhonePe.
I'll ask Chandra to jump in because I feel like the PhonePe example comes much more closer to, in my head, closer to advertising because it feels like almost that PhonePe is a publisher, and how much would you pay at a CPM basis or a CPI basis or something like that?
So I would say there are two parts to this, right? One is how closely is the value proposition aligned to the channel. The good and the bad thing with AI tools is they are uh, generic apps, right? For the lack of a better word, like a PhonePe. When you hyphenate a PhonePe user and say Google Gemini, there isn't too much dissonance, right? In the sense that yes, PhonePe is mainstream enough, is representative of the population, and so is Gemini, right? It's something that works for a Bhojpuri user. It will also work for a person sitting in say Cuff Parade, for the lack of a better word, right? Uh, Once you pass that litmus test that at reasonable scale, the channel and the value proposition both are aligned, mainstream enough, then I would argue it's the more the merrier, right? This is, for example, this is not a product that you would go after a niche HNI magazine for that fact, right? You would plaster your billboard literally at every scaled channel. So I would say there is no dissonance between an Airtel and a 4P. You could argue that uh, is there a certain channel mix and user mix of each channel that makes one channel more effective than the other or more ineffective compared to the other? Uh, I would argue that uh, not knowing exactly what a PhonePe audience splits like or looks like and what an Airtel user looks like, uh, the chances of finding new users, relatively sticky telco users, the hinterlands of India, right, might be better with an Airtel rather than a PhonePe. Though Airtel's activation chances are also not that superior, right? There's no Airtel service that you use daily. Yes, you use the phone daily, but you don't use My Airtel app daily for you to create those touch points with the users, right? So it will boil down into some complicated multiplication of channel touch points of the channel, the overlap of the value proposition with that channel, and that multiplication kind of decides which channel is more effective. The good part is in this case, PhonePe versus Airtel is hardly a trade-off. You would do both. Yes, you would have overlapping acquisition on the channel. Yes, the top 50 million of PhonePe and the top 50 million of Airtel are going to be near 99.9% overlap. But every incremental discovery by a user on PhonePe who's not an Airtel subscriber gives you that user, right? Gives you an incremental user which you wouldn't have gotten if you had stuck to only one channel. So I would say there is layers of peeling that needs to happen. At Yes, will they go for a fourth or fifth mainstream large channel? It starts reaching a point where you've already acquired that user directly or indirectly through 3 or 4 channels. So it's going to be a terrible investment to again blow up, say, a 30 million or a 50 million on another mainstream channel after you've gotten the first 2 or 3.
Chandra, I just want to say that you've broken our hearts
Yeah.
by saying that they will not go to HNI where, subscriptions and publications where, presumably like elite people read. So I can't expect a call from Sam Altman, but okay, great. Question for both of you, which is what I wanted to ask earlier, which is if you had to guess the activation rate for Airtel and Jio, let's keep it to telcos for now. I mean, again, we are all just guessing here. So, what would you put? What would be a number, Chandra, from the telco side that you think a telco could confidently say, yeah, this much we think we can activate? And similarly, I guess, PDM, from your side, I guess, you put yourself in the shoes of an AI company, and if this, what would the math be from their side, thinking this much activation we should expect? We understand the logic of tiers and there's going to be incentives, but
Can I give
baseline,
my completely uninformed
you're not allowed to
throw
say
it on the
1%.
wall this thing? No, it's somewhere between 5 and 10 million is my random guess.
5 and 10 million?
Like
Wait, and let's
like
say, I mean, of
actual,
course,
like 10 million, yeah, total activations. Like Perplexity signs up with Airtel has 391 million users. Activations are around 10 million is my guess. That's
okay,
a good
so that's
number.
around 3%, give or take, 2 to 3%.
Yeah, it's
is what
pretty
you're
high
saying.
actually. I don't know. It's just completely uninformed, random.
my
Just let the
ballpark
experts talk.
my ballpark is kind of in the similar zone as Rohin. So the way I see it is, and it probably touches on the earlier question, Rohin, that you asked on. I think the way to look at like a Phonepe versus Airtel is also different. Like one is, if you think of it a little bit on first principles, like Phonepe is a bit of a marketing channel versus Airtel is a bit of more of a sales channel. So to the extent that the underlying business model continues to be subscriptions, I guess a bundle is always generally will have better activation rates because you can latch on to the underlying kind of subscription service that the telco is providing. Versus in PhonePe, essentially, it's a marketing surface. You are essentially doing a CPM, CPI based activation. But like, if I were to
Correct.
do the math on this, the way I see it is, yeah, as an AI company, anything in the ballpark of 15 to 20 million is what I would ideally want to get out of it. Because I'm also looking at this from the lens of, hey, India as a market, like if I'm making I'm a multi-country global product. I know that India is a market which necessarily, regardless of what the monetization model is always going to be a low ARPU market. So for the math to make sense, in the larger scheme of things, of opportunity cost, or why should a chat GPT or OpenAI invest resource in building a chat GPT go, like if you were to think of from that lens, you have to have a certain minimum scale at that lower ARPU for the long-term kind of investments to kind of make sense and the ROI to make sense. So anything that's like less than 15, 20 million to me feels like it's insufficient enough to be like, it's not sufficient to be attractive. But if I take a more realistic lens, the kind of knowing a little bit of my history from my past experience, also knowing that yes, AI usage and chatbot penetration is growing in India, but it's still concentrated among a few. I would say the adoption curve has not yet moved to the mainstream fully. So there is a natural ceiling on like what percentage of your kind of broader hinterland user is today going to see a use case for ChatGPT kind of today, even if it's available for free. So my more realistic guess of what that number is probably similar to yours, which is like I would say anywhere between 5 to 7, best case 10 million is kind of what I would kind of presume it would be landing at right now.
Chandra, your guess?
Somewhat similar. Somewhat similar purely because, like, 360, 400 million subs from a top line perspective makes complete sense. But when you actually write down all the hoops that you need to cross, right? You'll discover it on your MyGeo app and My Airtel app. You might show interest, you read a promotion somewhere, you need to make a mental note of it, come back. I don't see that in reality being anything materially more than 10 million, right? And I'm sure there are throttling where there is a desired number that everyone's gunning towards, both say Perplexity and Airtel, where you get more users and they start really creating crater size holes in your PNL, versus somewhere a sweet spot where you know that yes, you are getting all the benefits, right? Data, branding, visibility, maybe even consumer metrics to show to the board that you're adding subs and whatnot, right? So I would assume that on paper, in reality, that number must be sitting somewhere in that 5 to 10 million range. A 15 million is where it starts becoming so successful that it's not healthy for you if you were Perplexity or something like that. If you are Gemini, it's completely different, right? Like, I'm sure they will be a lot more aggressive because you can get a user who's not cannibalistic to your core mobile monetization business, whatever that is, right? Off of google.com or thereabouts.
Chandra, I mean, on this point of cannibalism and non-profitable users, I would assume that all of these users who are being onboarded through these partnerships, even though technically they're being onboarded to pro plans, etc., they are cohorted to some sort of like a plan where their usage can be monitored and limited. And the beauty of AI plans is at any point, if you are turning out to be an unprofitable user, the system can just show you that, oops, you've hit your limit for today, please check back later, and you'd be none the wiser, right? I'm telling you, it happens with me when I use Google's Gemini as part of our Google suite, because there are so many tiers and there's so much usage. Oh, you generated an image, now you gotta keep quiet for the next one day. Oops, you generated a video, now we'll come back after 3.7 hours, right? So I'm just saying that there is so much of scope. I can imagine that all of these users will be kind of monitored, and if anyone kind of crosses over that, they'll be shown that rate limited for a while. I mean, I have no proof, but
Yeah.
I would assume it's common
Yeah.
sense that you do that.
Absolutely, Rohin. More than rate limiting, what seems to be happening is, at least, and there was a Reddit thread which was a very interesting thread where someone pointed out that they were getting better results on Perplexity standalone app versus what they were getting on the Airtel promoted one.
I saw this.
Yeah, and
Oh.
so it's a tightrope walk for anyone, right? Like Gemini, Perplexity, OpenAI.
This is
Uh,
just
you
so
can
amazing.
you can route the model to a smaller LLM, to maybe cheaper
That's right. You can
infrastructure.
put a skin on it,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
almost like,
yeah.
now another analogy that comes to mind is all these headline numbers of it costs 17,000, it costs 35,000, it's 12 months, it's 18 months. So it reminds me of sale season in India, right? Where product prices are marked up 2x just before they're discounted by 50%. Because at the end of the day, everyone knows that Indians want to know what is the retail price and what am I getting it at. It doesn't matter if you're giving it to me for free. I want the more expensive thing for free. I don't want the cheaper one for free,
I mean,
right?
I'm just feeling very sympathetic towards PDM because unfortunately on the OTT side he never had any of these levers. But imagine how amazing it would have been if he could basically look and say, "This fellow is from AutoPay. I will show you only 2 episodes of this TV show. This person is on telco. You get to see the entire 5 seasons. It's great for you."
Yeah, I think
So,
they
yeah.
definitely have more knobs and dials that they can turn, Rohin, to your point, to like rate limit. I don't know if they will Perplexity obviously is a slightly different beast, and likely that they probably are already doing it. The red thread may, for all you know, might be true. But I think if I look at it from Gemini or like Google and OpenAI's kind of perspective, I think it's not a lever that they will want to pull yet. Because at this stage, I think what they're looking to get is the more engagement, the more habit building I can drive, the better it is. And like throttling essentially flies in the face of like, okay, if I'm going to get throttled to Gemini with Geo, might as well try the OpenAI on Phonepe and ChatGPT on Phonepe and see if that
Yeah.
doesn't throttle me. So I think it is another of what they're trying to do now. But yes, they do have those kind of levers at their disposal, which a lot of the businesses actually don't.
Also, coming back to the math now, if you're assuming again, let's say 15 million. Let's
10
have
million users at 5,000 rupees a year is where we are
5,000
at,
rupees
right?
a year. Yeah, which is where we are. But the 5,000 rupees a year actually splits into two because it includes inference cost. So remove the inference cost for a second.
Yeah,
Let's just look at-
5,500 is what? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. So
5,000
let's-
for inference plus 500 for acquisition
Correct.
is where we
So-
arrived at, right?
Correct. So that means let's say it's $5 that they're paying per acquisition. That's what we're really saying, right? So we're paying that on an average, you're paying $5 per acquisition. And let's say you can acquire, say, 15 million. Well, that's what, 75 million. Let's $75 million is what you would be paying.
15 million was an ambitious goal where
It
we
was an
said that
ambitious
like if
goal,
they
but I'm just
yeah.
saying that let's assume they do a marketing blitz, let's assume they go crazy, let's assume all of these things happen, and we say okay, 15, that's $75 million that they're paying to a telco, which we all know how much. Forget the inference side of things, but I'm saying from a just a war chest, it's close to a rounding error, right, for any of these companies.
Yeah, it is pretty much a rounding error.
Okay, so now on the benefit side, very quickly, I want to spend 10 minutes and cover the benefit side, then we can call it a day. So on the benefit side, let's start with the telcos, right? I'm going to again start with the number that we just discovered, which is the $75 million, right? I was just looking up Airtel's quarterly revenue. Airtel makes quarterly revenue last quarter was somewhere close to 50,000 crores INR, which comes down to on a monthly basis.
What was the profit? Yeah, that revenue
Oh,
doesn't
it goes
matter
to
much.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So let's figure out Airtel's profits. Should I use Perplexity to find out? Okay.
Depending which telco are
You know what?
PGK?
Why don't you do one thing? Why don't you do
Yeah.
the even the most advanced thing? Why don't you do math using AI engines? Why don't you say 500 rupees per user per month into 15 million users is how much? And let's see how many of them are able to return that.
I have already
That's
started
the true
using
test.
AI to do the most complicated thing ever, which is convert from crores INR to USD millions. So that is always the. Okay. Airtel's net profit for the last quarter ending September 2025 was 8,000 crores, right? That is for a quarter.
That's about what, $900 million.
$900 million.
Roughly, yeah.
So, yeah, this is not bad. If you're getting 75 million, it's not a small chunk of that. So I can understand. Okay. So that's one benefit. Is there any other benefit for the telco side?
Data. Oh, for telcos.
Yeah, we're starting with telcos. We'll come to the AI companies. We have covered some of the benefits that PDM has listed in terms of retention, renewals, and also in terms of data, which is direct and not synthetic. But is there anything else on the telco side apart from pure money?
It is. I think
can
eventually
think of?
flows down to money, but I think in some ways, I don't know what the mechanics of all the deals are, but when you you essentially bundle some of these kind of add-ons to whatever are your highest ARPU plans. So it's also a bit of a upsell lever to drive more people into kind of upgrading to higher plans. Eventually, it flows down again to your kind of bottom line in some way. But that essentially is one more benefit for any kind of bundling from the telco side, whether it's OTTs or AI companies.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree. Somewhere you want to also assume that you're building a cohort that is the most lucrative cohort, right, for both Airtel and Reliance. Today is some pricing person at OpenAI who decided that you want to have step function, right, 20 and 200. The fact is, all of these prices that we are seeing are just dollar converted into rupee, right? A 1950 for an OpenAI, and same with Gemini. So I would assume there is enough margins there for everyone to figure out what is that price that makes my lucrative consumers stick around for more, right? Maybe I go from Pro to Pro Plus at some point in time. So I would argue a very well-run bundling program can really start creating and lock-ins around your core 20, 30 million who are pulling in a bunch of your profits and give reasons for the next 80 million to possibly move into that 20 million bucket, right? The 80 and 20 are just numbers I threw around there, but conceptually you want to kind of create incentives and motivation for keeping that highest profit customer and growing and pushing more people into that cohort.
That said, I have my doubts. I have my doubts on how many of those people paying $20 are actually using the telco bundles. Quite likely, a lot of them are adopters who probably signed up kind of anyway.
Fair. I guess
they may switch over time, but I think it's a small fraction.
I guess the closest analogy is credit cards, right? What you're really saying is you're hoping that people stick to the credit cards for the reward or something else that you get along with that list of things. I think that's broadly the analogy that you're thinking.
Yeah.
Or become a more loyal credit card user as a result of it. Okay, fair enough. I get it. Cool. Awesome. I think that covers all of it. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
The only quick comment on the inference cost.
Yeah.
You would argue that it might sound like a meaty chunk today, but at the rate at which inference costs are falling and the architectures that you can now use, maybe the older GPUs that you can now reuse for inference, I would argue it's almost like, at least from the AI firms, you want to create a virtuous cycle, right? You want to acquire users at scale. You want to tweak models so that they get faster at 3 times the speed or n times the speed. And then you want to build habits so that you can create both subscription models and potentially advertising models, right? At some point in time for people who won't pay. Now, the only way to kind of create this virtuous cycle is to move all three things in lockstep, right? And there is no easy way to size it. There are only potentially three outcomes, right? Scorched earth, everyone goes scorched earth, and then in 2 years we have a recession where it might take 20 years to come out of it. Or the most likely scenario is, yes, you overspent, it was a bad deal, but guess what? You discovered the market in 2 years, what would have otherwise taken you 5 or 6 years. And the best case scenario, which everyone's working towards, that there was this new monetization that added $1 trillion and we had dibs on that, right? Like we will land eventually in one of these three, hopefully discrete outcomes, and then everyone's an optimist. Everyone who's doing a deal is either chasing his promotion or is an optimist, which is why it can't hurt. Yes, it will hurt financially, but it can't leave them with a state where they had the resources, they had the capital, they had the capabilities, and then someone wrote a case study about how they botched it up very badly on the AI side.
Yeah, no, I agree with Chandra. I think the regret of not playing the game is probably a lot more playing, I guess, compared to kind of, in some sense, like you said, PGK, the amount of money they're spending is still a rounding error in the larger scheme of things. And the monitor, I think in the three scenarios that Chandra laid out, I think whether or not monetization works out or how well it works out is questionable. I think that's something that no one knows, and there's a bet that everyone's making. But the fact that inference costs will come down over time, there's a lot more certainty on that. So I think the fact that those costs are high today is something the AI companies are probably okay digesting, because they know it is something that will over time kind of come down. Moore's law will kind of play its kind of part. The monetization part, I think, is the open bet, which I guess everyone's kind of in some sense kind of banking on that'll work out for us to kind of make money eventually.
PDM, you're missing what Chandra said. Chandra said $1 trillion monetization potential, right? So I'm going to call you specifically when it hits $1 trillion and say, as an ex-OTT person, please tell us how you feel about it. But we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about if and when we get to that stage.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been a wonderful discussion. Really glad that we were able to figure this out together. It's a fun, interesting number and opens up tons of possibilities. And I think that it was really great we were able to look at it from all of these sides. Thank you so much, Chandra. Thank you so much, PDM. Thank you so much, Rohin.
Thank you, Prakash, and thank you, Chandra.
Oh, thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 2x2. This episode was mixed by a resident sound engineer, Rajiv CN. If you feel there's something we've missed out in this discussion, or you feel some numbers or facts don't add up, you can write to us with your thoughts at 2x2@theken.com. And if you're listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, please show us some love for the podcast by leaving us a rating. Lastly, if you loved the episode, share it with people, friends, family members, colleagues who you feel might find it insightful as well. We'll be back next week with another exciting discussion and 2x2 for you to think about.